Always my soulmates. By Watermelon's Melon Felon. Chapter 9, Music to My Mind. The earliest time Yuri remembered hearing the music was when he was 4. It was a sad song, or so it sounded to him. And no matter how often he mimicked the words to the best of his ability, no one knew what he was saying. It was in a different language. Yuri never learned the name of the song. He didn't even know what it was about. But almost every night around his bedtime, that song would play in his mind and he would fall asleep to an unknown lullaby. Victor hummed along to the music. He knew it was his soulmate, and he knew that this song was what they were thinking of. He just wished he knew what it meant. This one in particular was on a loop, and all his mother could tell him was that it sounded Asian. Not much help, but the song did relax him a bit. It sounded like a lullaby, and while he knew he should be paying attention to his classes, he found himself sitting and listening instead. It was more interesting than maths anyway. Yuri had gotten used to the music, but he often wondered why his soulmate resorted to mentally singing Eye of the Tiger to themselves on a near-constant basis, between 11 and 3 every day. That one song seemed to be on repeat. As payback, Yuri would think of his favorite girl group and have his favorite song on repeat, if only because he knew that repetition would bore some individuals. It was a petty sort of payback, but he didn't mind. Victor's soulmate kept odd times. Whenever it was Victor's bedtime, he would find himself serenaded, and he meant that very lightly, with hardcore American rock bands. He was glad that they at least had an eclectic taste in music, but where were they that such music was welcome at such times in the evening? Katsuki Yuri sighed as PG beamed at him. The suggestive look was annoying, and he stuck his tongue out simply because he was frustrated. All he wanted to do was sleep. All he wanted to do was rest. His soulmate decided to rave or something because the music was loud and grating. In the afternoon would be fine. Midnight, when he's exhausted from a day of skating and training, he did not want to be stuck listening to this. Life sucks sometimes. He was going to fail! He was going to fall or trip! He missed the landing. But he managed to save himself, sort of. Still, he was right to worry because he knew something was going to happen. He'd heard the comments. A lot of people didn't think he deserved to be there. He knew that he wasn't the best, but he had genuinely thought that he had a chance. He was preparing himself for a triple axel when suddenly the music of the ring disappeared and the loud screeching of a guitar filled his ears. Yuri's jump was messed up immediately, and he didn't even get one revolution in before he collapsed on the ice, clutching his head. It was a fail, and he couldn't even finish the performance. Having a soulmate was hell! Victor was unsure of what to do. There was a particular song flitting through his mind. This song had been on repeat for 3 weeks. He wouldn't mind if the song did not worry him so intensely. He knew English, was verbally fluent in it, could read it pretty well also. The song was sad. The song was dangerous. It talked about self-harm. It told a story about the loss of life and how things kept going from bad to worse. He didn't know what had happened, but his soulmate was in a rut of some sort. Enough that suicidal music played in his mind for hours upon hours, every day. Victor, being his normally cheerful self, tried to counter it with happy music, but the sadness persisted. What could he do? It was sometime in the early morning that he found himself awoken by familiar music. He recalled it very well. He'd performed to it and even won his 5th Grand Prix with that very same music. Still, the music played through his mind with a stunning amount of clarity, and Victor found himself standing in the middle of his lounge, swaying along to the music. It had been so long since he'd skated simply for the fun of it. And he was relieved, because this meant that his soulmate was focusing on other things and not self-harm. Later on, he was not expecting to find himself assaulted by hundreds of emails linking him to the same video. A video of a familiar face skating his own routine, the one that he'd reminisced on just that morning. He hadn't known the boy was a fellow skater. He also felt kind of bad for assuming he was just a fan. Especially since, if he remembered correctly, he hadn't been blushing and stuttering when looking at Victor. Katsuki Yuri breathed life into Victor's performance, showing the clear enjoyment that Victor himself had been lacking, giving the emotion that Victor had been unable to give himself, displaying a near-perfect tribute to Victor's hollow victory. And in that instant, Victor made the decision that if he wanted to rekindle his old love of skating once again, then he needed to take a break and pursue a new avenue. Victor smiled at the young man and gestured widely, holding his hand out in invitation. The moment was silent, the two staring one another down, when Victor's mind was suddenly filled with music. The music continued on in a sultry beat that got Victor to wiggle his hips just a bit. As if on cue, Yuri's face went red and the music cut off instantly. He then fled, leaving Victor to consider what had just happened. And also to plan for later. Victor took his time testing out his theory, because if Yuri was actually his soulmate, then Victor got lucky. So Victor found himself randomly thinking of the most erotic music that he had ever heard before, also he could test out whether or not Yuri could hear what he was mentally singing, and every time gave him some form of a reaction, although the most recent one was his favorite. Yuri had been attempting to perfect his triple axel and had taken a break after 2 hours of practicing. As he was drinking some water, Victor decided he was going to have a little fun and thought of another song. Yuri proceeded to choke on his water, blush an intriguing shade of pink, and not look Victor in the eye for the rest of the day. It was great! If that wasn't enough of an example, Victor didn't know what would be. All he had to do was tell Yuri that they were soulmates. Really? Victor nodded, though Yuri wasn't too sure. Fine, I'm going to think of a song, and I want you to repeat the lyrics. A moment later, Victor opened his mouth and said, Bakayero honto no jibun? The pronunciation wasn't that great, but it was exactly the song Yuri had been thinking. Well, that was settled. I'm not paying you a coaching fee, he decided. Before Victor could comment, he was already speaking again. You're the reason why my triple axel was messed up and the cause of my sprained ankle at the Grand Prix, which led to me being unable to finish my performance. I was pissed at you for weeks. What possessed you to listen to baby metal of all things at that time? Victor blinked, obviously astounded by Yuri's words. Not that he would take them back. He was most likely going to fail anyway because of the nerves, but he could have at least failed while finishing. I didn't mean to cause trouble, Victor murmured, clouded blue eyes downcast. Yuri sighed. Well, you owe me. Not to be my soulmate, because I've been desensitized to the idea of soulmates. You owe me for the pain and embarrassment. I'm sorry. The brunette looked away. He'd been incredibly angry at his soulmate for weeks following that trauma. What good reputation he'd managed to cultivate had been ruined, and Yuri found himself locked in the cramping depression afterwards. He even thought of turning his soulmate away if he ever met them, simply because he was that angry. But now his soulmate was his idol, someone he admired more than anything. And that made it hard for him to reconcile his bitterness and adoration. They were apparently for the same person, so where did the two go from there? Victor wasn't going to let this stop him. He could tell that Yuri still liked him, but he could also see that Yuri was torn. However, he did not deny Victor, and that was as good as acceptance in his book. Victor Nikiforov never gave up on anything.